Mackenzie Johnston with Cattle News Central, bringing you your June 2nd cattle industry headlines. Brought to you by Ag Risk Advisors. They manage your risk so you can manage your operation. With the weather being unstable, there is no better time to look into coverage for your feed crops. The annual forage deadline is right around the corner. With their state-of-the-art technology and superb customer service, you can be confident that your policy is in good hands. Ag Risk Advisors, risks averted, legacies preserved. We are also sponsored by American Beef Producer Magazine. They are doing their part to promote nutritionally wholesome beef through their campaign, Real Beef Made from Plants. This campaign is reminding the general public that beef is already made from plants. It is not some fake product sitting on a grocery store shelf, packed with chemicals and an ingredients list a mile long. Whether it be plant-based or even worse, grown in a lab, there is nothing that compares to traditional beef. So to promote beef, they are selling t-shirts, hoodies, caps, and stickers. I encourage you all to check out what they have to offer. Head on over to realbeef.shop. We're also sponsored by 4T Ag Insurance. Colt Tritt, owner and operator of 4T Ag, is a one-man show. He himself ranches, so he understands the risks that go along with the livestock industry. His experience with ranching allows him to help producers structure their operations for success, something that you are not going to find with a big agency who just hires agents that don't fully understand the industry. If your operation is not already enrolled in pasture, range, land, and forage insurance, also known as PRF insurance, now is the time to reach out to 4T Ag and get enrolled. You have until November 15th to do so. And if you'd like to learn more about 4T Ag and everything else they have to offer, head on over to 4tag.net. That is the number 4, TAG.net. Kelly Loeffler, chair of Greater Georgia and a former U.S. Senator for Georgia, recently submitted an opinion editorial to the Washington Times explaining how President Biden truly does not understand the challenges that our domestic farmers and ranchers are experiencing. And this opinion editorial is phenomenal. Last week, President Biden visited Kankakee, Illinois, to speak to farmers about the various challenges that they are facing due to inflation, energy prices, supply chain issues, and the conflict in Ukraine. During his speech, President Biden called on those in agriculture to fill the gaps in the world's food supply, just like he called on the U.S. oil and gas industry to address soaring energy prices. Like he has done all throughout his presidency, Biden is once again throwing out excuses left and right and playing the blame game instead of addressing and correcting his administration's policies that have created today's problems for farmers and ranchers. So for starters, let's talk about fuel prices, something we talk about way too often on this update. As we all know, farmers and ranchers rely on diesel to keep the wheels turning on their operations. Diesel recently hit an all-time high back on the 18th of May at $5.57 a gallon, and today the national average is $5.53 a gallon. A price that easily takes a large percentage of profit out of just about any operation. So how did we get these sky-high fuel prices? On Biden's very first day in office, he took countless measures to reduce domestic energy, which that has driven today's incredibly high fuel prices. These countless measures include canceling the Keystone Pipeline, halting oil and gas leases on public lands, and increasing taxes and red tape, making domestic production difficult. We knew if Biden did get into the White House, he would limit energy production. This was a big thing he ran on in his campaign against Trump. And now that he is in the White House, America is paying for it. Next, let's talk about some of the burdensome climate rules that have come about thanks to the Biden administration. The enhancement of standardization of climate-related disclosures for investors, something I had not heard of until I read this piece. This rule requires extensive disclosures by public companies of measured impacts on their entire supply chain. According to Farm Bureau, this rule would create substantial costs and liabilities for farms and ranches. The ramifications of this rule could also impact farmers and ranchers' ability to produce food, fuel, and fiber for not only the U.S., but the whole world. Another notable rule that has been reinstated by Biden's EPA is the Waters of the U.S. rule, also known as WOTUS, and we all know the impact that will have on all of our operations. During his speech in Illinois, Biden offered more insurance for double cropping and funding to increase domestic production of fertilizer. Just a couple of half-assed solutions that ignore the key challenges facing those in agriculture. So on the topic of fertilizer, the Senate Ag Committee released a report showing that the cost of fertilizer has increased 220% since January of 2021. It is obvious that the cost of fertilizer is way out of line. It has even stopped some from buying the product. But nonetheless, Biden's administration stated 2 weeks ago that the high cost of fertilizer would quicken the transition to compost and manure, using the phrase, never let a crisis go to waste. So essentially, the Biden administration is using this fertilizer shortage to push their green agenda. Biden is encouraging growth in the ag sector, but clearly he does not understand the challenges facing our farmers and ranchers. I just went over the impacts of fuel prices being so high, and then a couple of rules that are going to impact our industry, and then also fertilizer, how that is impacting our industry. But you and I both know I could sit here and I could talk for quite a while about other policies that he has put in place, other moves that he has put in place that are negatively impacting farmers and ranchers. We can talk about federal taxes. We can talk about trade agreements. We can talk about the border crisis. You name it. This administration has put in countless policies. They have established these policies that are negatively impacting domestic agriculture. And it's not just domestic agriculture. It is America as a whole. If Biden really wanted to help American farmers and ranchers, he would quit letting the left influence his regulatory agenda and ease regulatory expansion on farmers and ranchers. This administration also needs to end their war on domestic energy. Pipelines need to be restarted. Oil and gas leases and permits on federal lands need to be reopened. And taxes and red tape both need to be reduced in order to lower energy costs. This update is also sponsored by Circle 5 Cow School. If you are wanting to learn how to prep check your own cows or start AIing, Circle 5 Cow School is definitely the way to go. Almost every week they are hosting classes somewhere between Texas and Tennessee. If you want to check out their schedule, head on over to circle5cowschool.com. That is the number 5 in there, or you can go ahead and just give them a follow on Facebook. Drovers has reported on Wednesday, Ag Secretary Tom Vilsack announced a $2 billion package aimed at transforming the U.S. food system by improving supply chains and addressing issues exposed during the pandemic. The $2 billion package does include previously announced funding to expand meat and poultry processing, as we've talked about on here, and to finance new infrastructure such as cold storage. But along with that, the package includes $600 million that will go towards new aid to support food supply chain infrastructure outside of meat processing. The package also includes $400 million for regional food business centers, up to $300 million for a new organic transition initiative. I wonder what that's all about. And $75 million to support urban agriculture. This announcement comes at a time when supermarkets and distributors are pushing back on higher prices from food makers and inflation is spiraling out of control. According to the Wall Street Journal, Kroger and other grocery store chains have begun asking brands to prove why higher prices are necessary before accepting goods, and warning manufacturers that they will stop carrying goods if food companies won't negotiate prices. For months, retailers have been passing prices on to consumers, and shopper demand has remained strong. However, with inflation having more of an impact on consumer spending, consumers are starting to change their buying habits and looking at ways to stretch their dollar. Finally, Meeting Place has reported in its second quarter earnings report, Sanderson Farms posted a net income of $321.2 million. That is up from $96.9 million in the second quarter of 2021. So their net income more than tripled in the last year, just in the second quarter. Sanderson Farms is the third largest poultry producer here in the U.S., and the chicken giant produces 13.65 million chickens per week. The company cited a 33.6% increase in the average selling price for its products as fueling the gain in net profits, despite a 14.1% increase in feed cost per pound of broilers processed. Sanderson Farms was acquired by Cargill and Continental Grain last year for $4.5 billion. That acquisition is expected to be complete in the coming months. That is all I have for you guys this morning, and that is all I have for you guys this week. I hope you all have a wonderful weekend. Enjoy this gorgeous weather that we are having. I will catch you next week.